Ancient Egyptian hairstyles were a silent language woven into history. We often marvel at their pyramids, but their hair held secrets of power, faith, and identity for 3,000 years. You will learn to read the hidden messages in every braid, every shaved head, and every towering wig. Why did pharaohs wear strange, helmet-like curls, and what shocking substance did they use as ancient hair gel? What story does your own hairstyle tell about you today? Long before the age of pyramids, in the sun-scorched lands along the Nile, hair was a matter of pure survival. The earliest Egyptians faced a relentless environment, and their hairstyles were a direct response. For men, the choice was simple and stark. A shaved head or closely cropped hair was not a fashion statement, but a brilliant defense against the heat and the ever-present threat of lice. It was the ultimate practical solution for a life spent under the desert sun. Women, meanwhile, often let their hair grow long, a flowing contrast to the men's clean scalp. This long hair was not yet the elaborate architecture it would become. It might be tied back for work, or perhaps woven into a simple, functional braid. Yet even in this world of necessity, the first flickers of adornment appeared. Imagine a woman carefully running a comb carved from a single piece of bone through her hair, or securing a strand with a sharpened pin of wood. These were the humble beginnings of a beauty ritual that would one day define a kingdom. In these simple acts, function was already starting its slow, graceful dance with form, setting a foundation upon which 3,000 years of style would be built. This simple division of long and short hair could not last. As the first monumental pyramids began to pierce the Egyptian sky, society itself was being carved into rigid layers of stone and power. Hairstyles evolved from mere practicality into a precise visual language of class. For the pharaohs and nobles who commanded these colossal constructions, their hair became as deliberately crafted as their tomb. Look upon the serene face of Pharaoh Djoser, captured for eternity in stone. His hair is not the wild growth of a common man, nor the simple shaved scalp of a laborer. It is a perfect geometric cap of tight curls, cut straight across the forehead in a thick, unwavering bang. This is not a casual choice. This structured, almost architectural style projected control, order, and an unshakable authority that mirrored the step pyramid he built. It was a crown made from his own hair. Yet even this royal look was not always enough for the grandeur of ceremony. Enter the wig. For special occasions, the elite would own these intricate creations, transforming their appearance entirely. A nobleman could switch from his cropped daily style to a long, heavy, braided wig for a festival. A royal woman could adorn herself with a towering headpiece of thousands of tiny, intricate braids. Wigs offered a new kind of power, the power of instant transformation and spectacle. They separated the elite from the common people not just by what they owned, but by what they could become at a moment's notice. The foundation laid in earlier times was now being built upon, layer by layer, into something far more complex and telling. But these evolving styles were never just about status or fashion. Every single hairstyle was a dense concentration of meaning, a silent statement about a person's place in the world and their state of being. Hair was a living symbol. Long, thick, flowing hair was not merely beautiful. It was a powerful public declaration of youth, of vitality, and of fertility. In a civilization that revered the cycles of life and the Nile's renewing floods, such hair was a personal echo of that abundance. On the opposite end of this symbolic spectrum, a shaved head could speak volumes in its silence. For a person in mourning, it was a stark, visible sign of grief and loss, a removal of personal vanity in a time of profound sorrow. Yet for the priests who served the gods, that very same shaved head meant something entirely different. It represented the ultimate ritual purity, a clean slate free from the impurities that could offend the divine. They presented themselves as blank canvases for their sacred duties. And then there were the children. A young boy would often be seen with his head completely shaved, except for one single, carefully braided lock of hair left to grow long on the side of his head. This was the side lock of youth, a clear and universal sign of childhood. It was a visual marker that set them apart from adults, a symbol of their protected status. The powerful moment of transition to adulthood was marked by the ceremonial cutting of that lock. So when we look at a statue or a tomb painting, we are not just seeing a hairstyle. We are reading a biography. Is that figure bursting with long, elaborate braids? They are telling us about their strength and life force. Is their scalp bare and smooth? We must ask if they are a grieving widow or a pious priest. Does a young prince wear the sidelock? He proclaims his journey is just beginning. To understand this code is to hear the whispers of individual lives across thousands of years. This growing symbolic language of hair soon found new forms of expression. As Egypt entered the prosperous era of the Middle Kingdom, hairstyles underwent a quiet revolution, shifting from the stark, powerful statements of the Old Kingdom towards something more fluid and sophisticated. The rigid, geometric caps of curls worn by pharaohs like Djoser began to soften. For the elite men and women of this new age, hair became longer, more flowing, and imbued with a sense of graceful volume. It was as if the culture itself was exhaling, allowing for more personal expression within the established codes of status. Men of high rank now often wore their hair to their shoulders, a noticeable departure from the shorter, more controlled looks of their predecessors. This was not unkempt, but deliberately styled to suggest a luxurious abundance, a testament to both the wearer's wealth and the increasing technical skill of the artisans who served them. The true marvel of this period, however, was reserved for women. This is when we see the brilliant introduction of the tripartite wig. Imagine a masterpiece of woven hair, so meticulously constructed that it falls in three distinct, heavy sections. One thick, lush fall of hair cascades straight down the wearer's back, while two identical sections flow forward over each shoulder, framing the face in a perfect, symmetrical display. This was not merely hair, it was architecture for the head, a triple-streamed symbol of elegance that required incredible artistry to create. This move toward greater volume and body was no accident. It was directly powered by the growing mastery of wig makers and their sophisticated use of hair extensions. They could now build upon a person's natural hair, adding length and thickness to create styles that were previously impossible. This was the dawn of a more elaborate aesthetic, where hair was not just a symbol, but a crafted work of art, setting the stage for the even more dramatic expressions of power that were yet to come. That tripartite wig, with its three heavy falls of hair, was a true feat of engineering. To understand its construction is to appreciate the Egyptian artisan's genius. These were not simple hair pieces you could slip on and off with ease. The foundation was a tight, flexible mesh cap, often made from finely woven plant fibers or linen. Onto this base, hundreds, sometimes thousands, of individual strands were meticulously knotted. The material varied dramatically with the wearer's wealth. For the elite, nothing but real human hair would do, often sourced through trade or as tribute. For those of lower status, clever substitutes like sheep's wool or even dyed fibers from the palm leaf were used to create a convincing illusion. The process was painstaking, a true luxury item that represented hours of skilled labor. But why go to such extraordinary lengths? The reasons were as practical as they were prestigious. In a land of scorching sun, a wig acted as a protective barrier for the naturally shaved scalp beneath, far more effective than a simple headcloth. The dense mesh base and the hair itself created a cushion of insulating air, actually helping to keep the wearer cooler than if they were bareheaded. And in a time when hygiene was a constant challenge, a wig was a brilliant solution to parasites. You could remove it, clean it thoroughly, and treat it with fragrant oils, keeping yourself and your living space free from lice. A wig was, in every sense, the ultimate multi-purpose accessory. It was a portable piece of shade, a personal cooling system, and a hygienic marvel, all while proclaiming your status to the world. It was, without a doubt, the ancient equivalent of a designer outfit made exclusively for your head. The sheer engineering of a new kingdom wig was matched only by its sheer weight and spectacle. This was Egypt's imperial age, a time of vast wealth flowing in from foreign lands, and every strand of hair on a noble's head announced that power. Think of Queen Hatshepsut, the female pharaoh who ruled as a king. Her statues show her not with the soft, tripartite styles of old, but with a head of thick, layered curls, a style of immense complexity that projected undeniable authority. For both men and women of the court, bigger was unequivocally better. Wigs grew larger, more layered, and more densely packed with hundreds, even thousands, of tiny, intricate braids. These were not just hairstyles, they were architectural marvels built upon the head, a deliberate display of the hours of labor required to create them. But the true sensory experience of these wigs went far beyond the visual. At a grand festival, a noble would place a perfumed cone of scented fat and wax right on top of their elaborate wig. As the hours passed and the room grew warm from bodies and torchlight, this cone would slowly, deliberately melt. Fragrant oils of myrrh and frankincense, precious imports from distant shores, would trickle down through the braids and ringlets. The wearer was literally crowned in a cloud of perfume, a walking, breathing testament to Egypt's reach and riches. Can you imagine the scene? The gleam of gold jewelry, the rustle of fine linen, and the intoxicating scent of luxury hanging in the air, all emanating from the crowning glory on their heads. This was hair as the ultimate status symbol, a living, breathing monument to an empire at its peak. Even the most spectacular wigs of the New Kingdom carried a deeper political message. The Nubian wig stands apart from all others, a helmet of dense, tight curls that seems to defy the very idea of softness. You can see its powerful silhouette crowning the heads of queens like Nefertiti and Tiye, a stark departure from the long, flowing styles of the past. This was not merely a new fashion, it was a deliberate and loaded symbol. Nubia, the land to the south, was a source of immense wealth for Egypt, rich in gold, ivory, and exotic goods. It was also a region Egypt had conquered and sought to control. By adopting this distinctly Nubian hairstyle, the Egyptian royalty was making a bold statement of power. They were not just wearing a wig, they were wearing the essence of a conquered land, literally incorporating its identity into their own regalia. It was a visual declaration that said, "We command your resources, we influence your culture, and we can wear your very likeness as a crown." The choice of this textured, curly hair over the straight or wavy styles common in Egypt reveals a sophisticated understanding of aesthetics as a tool of empire. It was a way to project dominance not through rejection, but through appropriation, a powerful reminder that in ancient Egypt, even the curls on a queen's head could be a matter of state. This radical shift in royal imagery reached its peak under the pharaoh Akhenaten. He shattered centuries of tradition, not only in religion and art, but in the very way his family's hair was depicted. The serene, muscular pharaohs of the past were gone, replaced by a ruler with a startlingly new look. Akhenaten's statues show a man with an almost shockingly elongated skull, a gaunt face, and a strangely stylized wig that falls in long, layered locks down his neck. His queen, the famous Nefertiti, and their many daughters are portrayed with similarly stretched heads, though often framed by more elegant and complex layered wigs than the king's own. The question that has haunted historians and archaeologists for over a century is simple yet profound. Were these bizarre features an honest, if exaggerated, record of a real genetic condition affecting the royal family, or were they purely symbolic, a new artistic convention designed to set the Holy Family of Aten apart from all who came before them, marking them as otherworldly vessels for the sun god's light? The wigs themselves offer a clue. They are not the massive architectural pieces of the past, but something looser, more fluid, and almost organic in their flow. This was a complete visual rebellion, a deliberate break from the established language of power. Every curl and lock from this period is part of an unsolved puzzle, a mystery carved in stone that makes the Amarna period one of the most captivating and strange chapters in all of Egyptian history. The royal children of Egypt carried the weight of their lineage not in crowns of gold, but in the careful arrangement of their hair, while the sidelock of youth was a universal symbol of childhood. For a prince or princess of the New Kingdom, it was transformed into a masterpiece. Imagine a young princess, her head shaved smooth for ritual purity and comfort, save for one extraordinary feature. From the very crown of her head grew a single, thick, and impeccably braided lock of hair. This was not the simple tuft of a common boy. This sidelock was a heavy, prominent plate, sometimes so long it would swing behind her as she moved. In other depictions, we see this same lock of youth styled into an elegant, long ponytail, meticulously sectioned and plaited. But the true mark of royalty was in the adornment. This sacred lock of hair, this symbol of her transitional state between childhood and adulthood, was not left plain. It was often tipped with a delicate cap of finely beaten gold or a precious bead of lapis lazuli. These were more than mere decorations. The metal cap protected the end of the braid from fraying, a practical solution, but it also shimmered with every step, a constant, glittering reminder of her divine bloodline. This careful styling tells us that in ancient Egypt, the journey to power began at birth. A royal child was never just a child, they were a future king or queen in training, and their very hairstyle was a daily lesson in their destiny. The ceremonial cutting of that lock in adolescence was not just a birthday celebration, it was a state event, a monumental step toward assuming the throne. Every precious bead woven into that braid was a promise of the power they would one day hold. Behind every king's monumental wig and every queen's intricate braids stood a master of their craft. The ancient Egyptian hairdresser was far more than a simple servant. They were a highly skilled professional artist. Tomb paintings from the age of the Pharaohs give us a remarkable window into their world. We see them at work, seated before their elite clients, their fingers deftly weaving hundreds of tiny braids or carefully fitting a heavy ceremonial wig into place. This was a role that required immense patience, a steady hand, and a deep understanding of style and symbolism. Their toolkit was both sophisticated and familiar. They used fine-toothed combs carved from wood or ivory, sharpened bronze razors for achieving the perfect shaved scalp, and long, sturdy hairpins to secure complex styles. Perhaps the most essential tool was the mirror, a disc of highly polished bronze fixed to a handle, allowing the client to inspect the hairdresser's meticulous work. The most trusted of these artisans served within the royal palace itself, attending to the pharaoh and his family. Their importance was so deeply recognized that they were often granted a remarkable honor, their own image painted onto the walls of their patron's tomb. This was not just a tribute, it was a sacred contract. It ensured that the hairdresser would be resurrected in the afterlife, ready to once again style the hair of their master for all eternity. The relationship was that vital, a bond of trust and artistry that was meant to outlast time itself. These master hairdressers, however, reserved their finest artistry for the palace walls. For the vast majority of Egyptians, such luxury was a world away. The everyday reality for a farmer in the field or a servant in a noble's house was defined by sun, sweat, and sheer necessity. While the elite wore their wealth on their heads, the common people wore their work. For a man laboring under the relentless sun, the choice was simple and stark. He would almost certainly shave his head completely or keep his hair cropped painfully short. This is not a fashion choice, but a matter of basic hygiene and comfort, a direct defense against lice and the oppressive heat. There were no wigs here, only the practical reality of a clean scalp. The women, too, adapted their beauty to their burdens. A woman grinding grain or weaving linen could not have long, flowing hair getting in her way. So she would wear it long, but tightly controlled, pulled back into a functional ponytail or twisted into a no-nonsense bun at the nape of her neck. This was hairstyle as tool, designed for maximum efficiency. Yet even in this world of function, the human desire for a small touch of beauty persisted. A simple braid might be woven into the ponytail, or the bun might be secured with a hairpin made of bone or cheap copper instead of gold. A length of dyed cloth could be tied as a headband or a few faience beads, their bright blue-green glaze mimicking precious stones, might be threaded into the hair. These small adornments were not about proclaiming status to the world, but about personal dignity, a quiet assertion of self amidst the daily grind. When we look at the art that shows these commoners, we are not seeing a statement of power. We are seeing a manual for survival, a glimpse into the lives of the 99% who built the kingdom with their hands, their hairstyles a silent testament to a life of relentless and essential labor. Even the most rigid traditions could not withstand the slow tide of foreign influence. As Egypt's central power fragmented during the Third Intermediate Period, a new wave of rulers from the West brought their own customs to the Nile Valley. Pharaohs with Libyan names now sat on the throne, and their personal styles began to seep into the fabric of Egyptian courtly life. One of the most striking changes was the sudden, visible presence of the beard. For centuries, a clean-shaven face had been the Egyptian standard for men, a mark of civilization and refinement. Yet these new rulers, men like the powerful chiefs of the Meshwesh tribe, often wore full, neatly trimmed beards. This was not the long, ceremonial false beard strapped to the chin of a god-king, but a real beard grown from the face of a living man. It was a subtle but powerful declaration of a different cultural identity taking root at the very heart of power. The transformation extended to the hair on their heads. The dense, layered wigs of the new kingdom began to give way to softer, longer styles. Instead of the tight, geometric curls of the past, the elite now favored looser, more flowing curls that fell freely around the shoulders. These new looks were often paired with different headdresses, like the simple, rounded cap that became a mark of the Libyan elite, a stark contrast to the striped Nemes headcloth of traditional pharaohs. This was not a rejection of Egyptian identity, but a fascinating fusion. The old forms were still there, the wigs and the braids, but they were now reinterpreted through a foreign lens. This era proves that Egyptian fashion was never created in a vacuum. It was a living language, constantly absorbing new words and phrases from its neighbors and even its conquerors, adapting to ensure its survival long after the age of empire had passed. The resilience of Egyptian identity was about to face its greatest test. As the Persian Empire stretched its shadow across the known world, swallowing Egypt into its vast domain, a quiet cultural battle began. It was a conflict fought not with swords, but with hair. The traditional forms, those powerful symbols of 3,000 years of history, refused to vanish. In tombs and on statues from this era of foreign rule, the familiar silhouette of the tripartite wig endures, its three heavy sections falling with an air of defiant grace. The Nubian wig, that helmet of tight curls born from imperial ambition, also persists, now repurposed as a symbol of an older, native power. These were not just fashion choices, they were declaration. To wear an Egyptian wig under Persian rule was to make a silent, public statement about an unbroken cultural lineage. Yet the influence of the new masters was impossible to ignore entirely. The Persian elite favored longer, looser, and more flowing hairstyles, often with carefully arranged curls that framed the face. In the cosmopolitan cities, some Egyptians, particularly those seeking favor with the administration, began to adopt these foreign looks. The most startling change, however, was on the faces of men. The Persian rulers and their officials were often depicted with full, stylized beards, a sharp contrast to the clean-shaven Egyptian ideal that had prevailed for millennia. This created a visible divide. You could walk through a crowded market and see two men standing side by side, one with a shaved head and face in the ancient tradition, the other with long, flowing locks and a neatly trimmed beard in the Persian fashion. This period shows us that cultural identity is not a fortress, but a living river. It can absorb foreign streams without losing its essential character. The Egyptians held fast to their wigs and their rituals, proving that even when a kingdom is conquered, its spirit can be woven into the very hair of its people. This careful balance between Persian influence and native tradition would be completely upended by a new conqueror from the north. When Alexander the Great marched into Egypt, he did not just bring a new army, he brought an entire cultural wave that would reshape the Nile Valley for 3 centuries. The Ptolemaic dynasty that followed his death ushered in an era of profound fusion, where Greek aesthetics met Egyptian tradition in a dazzling and sometimes contradictory dance. Nowhere is this delicate balancing act more perfectly captured than in the person of its final, most famous ruler, Cleopatra VII. To her Egyptian subjects, she was a pharaoh in the most ancient sense. On temple walls and during grand state ceremonies, she presented herself as the living goddess Isis, crowned with the heavy, traditional wigs of her predecessors. She wore the vulture headdress and the double crown, her appearance a carefully crafted echo of a 3,000-year lineage. This was a powerful political performance, a visual language designed to legitimize her rule and reassure her people that she was the true heir to the pharaohs. But in the private chambers of the royal palace, surrounded by her Greek courtiers and advisors, a different Cleopatra emerged. Here, she likely set aside the monumental wigs and adopted the fashionable styles of the Hellenistic world. Her hair would have been her own, styled in a much simpler, more natural fashion. The most popular of these was the melon hairstyle, a graceful look where the hair was swept back from the face and tied into a bun, with the sections of hair carefully arranged like the ribs on a melon. It was elegant, understated, and distinctly Greek. This was not a case of one identity being truer than the other. It was the ultimate act of political and cultural code switching. Cleopatra's genius lay in her understanding that power was not just about command, but about connection. She could be the divine Egyptian queen and the sophisticated Hellenistic ruler, sometimes within the same day. Every choice of hairstyle was a calculated move in a high-stakes game, a silent signal telling her diverse audience exactly who she needed to be for them in that moment. Her head was quite literally a stage for the final, dramatic act of Egyptian independence. Yet all this intricate braiding and towering architecture of hair was only the beginning. The final, dazzling touch came from an array of accessories that transformed a hairstyle into a masterpiece of personal wealth and divine favor. The ancient Egyptians did not simply style their hair, they crowned it. For the most elite, a simple gold diadem might circle the brow, its surface inlaid with lapis lazuli and carnelian, catching the light with every movement. During joyous banquets and festivals, both men and women adorned their wigs with fresh floral wreaths, delicate petals and fragrant blossoms woven into circles that perfumed the air around them. But some of the most fascinating adornments were the most functional. Hair rings, small circular bands crafted from gleaming gold or vibrant blue faience, were not merely decorative. They were used to hold specific, precious locks of hair in place, creating structured, tubular shapes that stood out from the rest of the style. These rings added rhythmic points of color and metallic shine along a cascade of braids. Even the humble comb was elevated far beyond its daily duty. Surviving examples are stunning works of art, carved from a single piece of glossy ebony or precious ivory. Their handles are often masterpieces in miniature, sculpted into the graceful form of a swimming duck or a leaping gazelle. So when an Egyptian noble looked into their bronze mirror, they did not just see a wig. They saw a walking gallery of craftsmanship, a symphony of gold, gemstones, flowers, and carved art, all harmonizing on the stage of their own head. This was the ultimate expression of a culture that believed beauty was a sacred duty, and that every detail, down to the smallest hair ring, was a tribute to the gods and a declaration of one's place in a glittering, ordered world. The brilliance of these styles would have been impossible without an equally sophisticated science of hair care. Ancient Egypt was a laboratory of personal grooming where chemistry and cosmetics met everyday life. To keep their hair and their magnificent wigs in perfect condition, they turned to the natural world for solutions. For daily nourishment, they relied on rich plant oils like castor and almond. These oils were not just for adding a healthy shine, they were essential conditioners that prevented the dry, brittle hair common in a desert climate, making even the most complex braids manageable. But for the truly architectural styles, especially the heavy, layered wigs of the New Kingdom, something stronger was required. This is where they invented an early form of hair gel. Artisans would carefully mix beeswax with tree resin, creating a pliable, sticky substance. When warmed in the hands and applied, this ancient pomade could lock hundreds of tiny braids into place for days or even weeks, defying gravity and heat. And what happened when the first signs of age appeared? The Egyptians had an answer for that, too. They developed dyes to cover gray hair, with henna being the most popular and effective. It provided a rich, reddish-brown tint that was both fashionable and culturally significant. For a deeper, more dramatic black, some recipes called for more startling ingredients, like the blood of a black animal, often an ox or a calf, mixed with oil or fat. While it sounds strange to us, this was a practical attempt to transfer the dark color directly into the hair. These were not random experiments, but the result of generations of observation and refinement. Their beauty rituals were a testament to a culture that saw personal adornment as a science, and every gleaming, perfectly set lock of hair as a triumph of human ingenuity over the harsh elements. That silent language of hair is not confined to paintings and statues. We can hear it spoken in the actual voices of the dead. The incredibly dry air of the Egyptian desert, a natural preservative, has gifted us with the most direct evidence imaginable: human remains with their hair perfectly intact after thousands of years. In the workmen's village of Deir el-Medina, the home of the artisans who built the royal tombs, we find the humble truths of daily life. Here, the body of a common woman was discovered, her hair still styled in a simple, practical braid. It was not a wig, not a monument, but her own hair, carefully arranged for eternity. This single, preserved plait tells a story of quiet dignity, a personal ritual performed by the very hands that help create a kingdom's immortality. Then, at the opposite end of the spectrum, we have the great royal mummies themselves. Lying in his sarcophagus, Pharaoh Ramesses II still possesses a striking head of fine, wavy hair. Its color, a distinctive reddish blonde, has been the subject of fascination for generations. Modern scientific analysis of these precious strands goes far beyond mere curiosity. By studying the chemistry of the hair, scientists can read a biography written in proteins and minerals. They can discern the general health of the individual, clues about their diet, and even detect the specific residues of the oils, waxes, and dyes they used in life. That legendary beeswax and resin gel, the rich plant oils, the henna dye, these are not just guesses from tomb paintings and more, the hair itself confirms their use. This physical evidence transforms our understanding from an interpretation of art into a direct conversation with the past. We are no longer just looking at a portrait of a pharaoh, we are examining the very strands that were once styled by his royal hairdresser. Each preserved lock is a time capsule, holding secrets of life, death, and the timeless human desire to present oneself to the world. This meticulous care for hair did not end at the grave. For the ancient Egyptians, the journey to the afterlife was the ultimate voyage, and every detail of one's appearance was a passport to eternity. They believed the soul would need its body, restored to perfect health and beauty, to live forever in the field of reeds. This is why so many individuals were buried with their finest wigs, their favorite combs, and their most precious hair rings placed carefully within the tomb. It was a practical provision for the soul's eternal needs. Can you picture the solemn ritual, a family laying their loved one to rest, ensuring their most elegant wig was close at hand? They were not just burying a body, they were packing a suitcase for an endless journey, and a well-styled head of hair was an essential item. This profound belief is written into the very spells meant to guide the dead. Spell 17 of the Book of the Dead, a collection of magical incantations, explicitly mentions the deceased arranging his hair as a necessary step before facing the final judgment. This was not a mere suggestion, it was a divine requirement. To appear before the gods with unkempt hair would be a sign of disrespect, a failure in the cosmic order of things. The archaeological record brings this belief to life in the most startling way. While most mummies were prepared with their own hair styled for eternity, some have been discovered with their ceremonial wigs placed right beside them in the coffin. In even rarer, more intimate finds, the mummy itself was found still wearing its full, elaborate wig, a final, defiant statement of identity carried across the threshold of death. This reveals a truth that resonates deeply even today. The desire to look our best, to present a confident and composed self to the world, was for them a concern that literally transcended the boundaries of life and death. This enduring belief that hair and nails keep growing after death is a powerful one, fueled by countless tales of the mummy's curse. Yet the truth is far more grounded in simple biology. When a person dies, all cellular activity, including the division that fuels hair and nail growth, ceases immediately. The body's intricate machinery shuts down for good. So what is actually happening to create this eerie illusion? The answer lies in a profound and natural process of preservation. After death, the body begins to dehydrate rapidly. The skin and the soft tissues beneath it lose their moisture and contract, pulling back from the hair roots and the nail beds. This dramatic shrinkage makes the hair shaft seem longer and the nails more pronounced, as if they have grown. They haven't. The frame has simply shrunk around the picture. For the ancient Egyptians, whose entire funerary practice was designed to defy decomposition, this desiccation was not a curse, but the ultimate goal. Their elaborate mummification process artificially accelerated this drying, preserving the body in a state of arrested decay. So the next time you hear a story about a mummy's hair seeming to grow in its tomb, you'll know the real story. It isn't a supernatural sign of life from beyond the grave, but a perfectly natural and quite mundane sign of a body returning to the elements. The legacy of Egyptian hair fashion refused to be buried in the sand. Long after Cleopatra's final breath, the Roman Empire, captivated by the exotic prestige of the Nile, eagerly adopted one of Egypt's most defining inventions, the wig. Roman elites, particularly women, coveted elaborate wigs made from the finest materials. But in a startling twist on the Egyptian tradition, the most sought-after hair was not dark and sleek, but blonde. The Romans sourced this prized commodity from captured Germanic tribes, turning the hair of their northern enemies into a symbol of high fashion in Rome. This was more than mere imitation. It was a transformation of an ancient art form into a new language of imperial power and luxury. The echoes continue to ripple through the centuries, lying dormant until a single event in the 1920s brought them roaring back to life. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb sent a shockwave around the globe, igniting a craze known as Egyptomania. Suddenly, the clean, sharp lines of ancient art were everywhere, and hair was no exception. The flapper of the Roaring Twenties cast aside the long, flowing tresses of her Victorian grandmother and embraced a revolutionary new look, the geometric bob. This severe, chin-length cut, often accessorized with a sharp headband that mimicked the line of a pharaoh's headdress, was a direct visual descendant of those stark, sculpted styles worn by kings and queens 3,000 years earlier. The ancient world was speaking directly to the modern age. Its aesthetic principles were born in the jazz clubs of Paris and New York. You can still see this conversation happening today. The clean, sharp angle of a contemporary asymmetric bob, or the intricate, protective braids woven into the hair of a person on a city street, are all part of a living lineage. These styles are not replicas, but rather a modern dialect of that ancient language of beauty and identity, proving that the secrets woven into Egyptian hair are still being decoded, strand by strand, in our own time. Recreating the simple, functional braid of an ancient Egyptian commoner is a task you could almost complete in an afternoon. All you would need is long hair, a simple cord, and perhaps a bone or wooden pin to secure the end. But to attempt a royal wig is to step into a different world entirely, one that demands the patience of a master craftsman. The journey begins not with hair, but with geometry. A skilled artisan would first have to measure the future wearer's head with meticulous precision, crafting a tight, flexible mesh cap from linen threads. This foundation must be perfectly fitted, for an ill-sized cap would be unbearably uncomfortable under its eventual weight. Then comes the quest for the hair itself. To be truly authentic, you would need to source real human hair, thousands upon thousands of individual strands, all of a similar texture and length. In the modern world, this is a costly endeavor, but for an ancient wig maker, it represented a significant portion of the wig's immense value. With the cap ready and the hair assembled, the true marathon begins. Picture yourself seated before a wooden stand, your fingers working for dozens, perhaps even hundreds of hours. Each strand of hair must be individually knotted onto the mesh base, row after row, building up the density and shape. For a style of intricate, tiny braids, the process is even more painstaking, requiring you to section, twist, and secure each one without the convenience of modern elastics or clip. And how would you hold it all in place? You would have to forego modern hairspray and mix your own ancient pomade, melting beeswax and tree resin over a low heat until it forms a pliable, sticky gel. Applying it evenly without creating a heavy, greasy mess is an art in itself. This monumental effort is more than a historical exercise. It is a profound reminder of the immense value and artistry embedded in every lock of hair that graced a pharaoh's head, a luxury built one single, painstaking knot at a time. These rigid distinctions between male and female hairstyles begin to blur when we look closer. The ancient Egyptians held a surprisingly flexible view of beauty, one that often defies our modern expectations. During the height of the New Kingdom, the most elaborate wigs were not the exclusive domain of women. A high-ranking male official might commission a wig of astonishing length and volume, its countless braids falling well past his shoulders, a display of wealth and status that we might initially associate with femininity. At the same time, depictions from this era show women adopting styles we would consider masculine. A noblewoman might be portrayed with a shorter, more natural-looking cropped cut, perhaps as a practical base for her heavy ceremonial wigs, but presented in art as a stylish look in its own right. This was not a subversion of norms, but simply part of the aesthetic language. The same Nubian wig, that helmet of dense curls, was worn with equal authority by the powerful Queen Tiye and the Pharaoh Akhenaten. This fluidity reveals that their concepts of presentation were rooted in different principles than our own. For them, a hairstyle was less about gender and more about power, divinity, and social rank. A man with long, flowing locks was expressing his elite status, not a different gender identity. A woman with a shaved head was emphasizing her ritual purity. The modern impulse to categorize everything neatly into male and female boxes simply does not apply to their world. Their aesthetic was a spectrum, not a binary, allowing for a freedom of expression that can still feel remarkably contemporary. Even the most magnificent wigs often concealed a very common human worry. The ancient Egyptians, for all their mastery over style, were not immune to the frustrations of hair loss. We find their struggles recorded not in grand tomb inscriptions, but in the practical pages of their medical texts. The Ebers Papyrus, a sprawling scroll of medical knowledge, dedicates entire sections to the problem of thinning hair and baldness. Their ancient physicians concocted a variety of treatments, each a fascinating blend of observation and hope. One popular recipe called for a paste made from crushed lettuce, a plant associated with the god of fertility, mixed with oil and massaged into the scalp. Another prescribed the fats of lions, hippos, or crocodiles, believing the powerful essence of these mighty animals could somehow transfer its strength to the failing hair follicles. Fenugreek, a herb still used today for its nutritional properties, was ground and applied as a healing poultice. We can picture an Egyptian noble seated in his home, patiently rubbing these pungent mixtures onto his scalp, hoping for a miracle. The true effectiveness of these treatments is, of course, unknown to us. Some, like the moisturizing oils, may have provided temporary improvement to the scalp's health, but they were fighting a battle against genetics and time with very limited tools. Yet their very existence speaks volumes. They reveal a society deeply concerned with personal appearance, one that viewed a full head of hair as integral to vitality and youth. For those whose scalps remained stubbornly smooth despite all the lettuce juice and crocodile fat, Egyptian culture offered the most elegant solution ever devised. The wig was more than a fashion statement, it was the ultimate cosmetic cover-up. A man or woman could step out into society, their beautifully crafted wig perfectly in place, projecting an image of lush, abundant hair and the social status that came with it. This seamless transition from frantic remedy to ready-made solution feels remarkably familiar. It reminds us that the anxiety over hair loss and the deep desire to conceal it is not a modern vanity, but a quiet, shared concern that connects us directly to the men and women of the Nile. From the simple braids of a farmer's daughter to the colossal, perfumed wigs of a pharaoh, Egyptian hairstyles were a vibrant and essential part of their identity for over 3,000 years. They were a complex language of status, religion, and personal expression, a code written not on papyrus, but on the very heads of the people. This was a language that everyone understood, from the royal court to the mud brick villages. The next time you see a statue or a painting from ancient Egypt, take a closer look at the hair. You are not just seeing a style, you are reading a story woven in strands of history. You can decipher the age of a child by the sidelock, recognize the piety of a priest by his shaved head, and feel the political power radiating from a queen's Nubian wig. Every braid and every shaved scalp has a tale to tell. Which era of these ancient hairstyles fascinated you the most? Was it the stark architectural power of the Old Kingdom, the flowing elegance of the Middle Kingdom, or the perfumed spectacle of the New Kingdom? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey through the silent language of hair, be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the world's ancient mysteries.